following the expiration of the 7-day ultimatum issued by leaders of the West African states so that the coup leaders in Niger will reinstate President Mohamed Bazoum. ECOWAS has fixed another summit to discuss and re-strategize on the political situation in the Republic of Niger. The meeting was convened by President Bola Tinubu, who doubles as chairman of ECOWAS and is slated to hold on Thursday, 10th August 2023. The meeting is expected to be attended by heads of state and governments of 14 West African countries, since Niger will not be participating. Recall that Mr. Bazoum was deposed on the 26th of July by the commander of the Presidential Guard, General Abdurrahmane Tichani, who proclaimed himself the new leader. Well, joining us
we have been, let me phrase it this way. His Excellency President Bola Ahmed Tinubu, in his capacity as the chairman of ECOWAS, has been unequivocal in his position that diplomacy is the best way forward. In representing the consensus position of the ECOWAS heads of state, he has communicated clearly that he, along with his colleagues in the bloc, would prefer a resolution that was obtained through diplomatic means, through peaceful means, rather than any other. And that will be a position that is maintained going forward, pending any other resolution that may or may not result from the ECOWAS Extraordinary Summit holding on Thursday.
Well, joining us via Zoom is Belgium-based public affairs analyst Collins Nweke. Collins, good morning. Thank you for joining us on TVC Breakfast.
Thank you for having me. Veronica, I guess?
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. That's Veronica. Yes.
Good morning.
Good morning. Now, we see ECOWAS has imposed another sanction through the Central Bank of Nigeria on supporters of the coup in Niger. And we also recall that the sanction previously given, though elapsed, the military junta in Niger has not budged with regards to, those sanctions. I'm wondering what you see this would bring, what changes, what is the difference this new sanction would put forward now that we are seeing that those who are supporting the coup are being faced with some sanctions. Do you think the junta would budge at this point?
It would have been a surprise if the junta actually budged at this time. So I mean, it is fair to say that what is actually playing out is actually, in the playbook of, the mass and cow that the military juntas usually play in a situation of this nature. Now, what is going to actually cut it is not one or two sanctions. It is going to be a mixture of carefully selected, sanctions. And I believe that one of the things that gladdens the heart of, peace lovers all over the world is the fact that if you look at what ECOWAS is doing, they are actually now beginning to very carefully select sanctions that target the military juntas themselves and the top elite who actually support, this seizure of power by the force of the gun. And I think they should continue to do that. What they should minimize is any sort of sanction that will actually, affect the everyday man in Niger, because ultimately that will be counterproductive. So yes, it is not a surprise that despite the two major, sanctions plus pulling the plug on electricity, that the juntas have not, given up, that they have not bought. But anyway, I believe that is the essence in terms of strategy, re-strategizing. That is the essence of the meeting that will be held tomorrow, Thursday, by ECOWAS leadership.
And talking about that meeting of tomorrow, the proposed meeting of tomorrow, what are your thoughts on the impact of this latest round of sanctions on, countries like Mali and Burkina Faso, which, before, since this turbulence started now, had said that any attack, a proposed military action on Niger would also be like an attack on them. They've given, a body language of siding with the Nigerian Republic. What are your thoughts on how that will affect talks tomorrow?
Well, I believe that while the talks, are ongoing tomorrow, they definitely would have to be, back channels to the leadership of the military government of both Mali and Burkina Faso. And that is actually, re-emphasizing, the option of diplomacy, mediation, and, sort of collaboration. Now, are we going to expect that, Mali and Burkina Faso are going to give up that easily? Certainly not. They will continue to talk tough. And when they do, I think it is important to realize that they derive their power from somewhere. There must be somebody somewhere that is telling them, don't worry, we are behind you. Don't forget that their own military might, has actually been reduced and subdued in the last year, from the moment they took the decision that, French troops there would have to go. So they don't have very much, but like we know, military contractors are somewhere, buoying them, letting them know that, yes, we will provide you whatever, shortage you have in military might. So the negotiations and the mediation should encompass a whole lot of players, and one can only expect that, the meeting of tomorrow, Thursday, by ECOWAS leaders would actually map out strategies to reach beyond Niger, beyond Mali, beyond Burkina Faso, to all other players, because it is only then that, they can begin to expect a semblance of a resolution.
Well, yesterday's statement coming out of the presidency, we hear that, of course, conversations are still ongoing and that there were widening consultations across the board. In the coming days, we'll be seeing more of that. And then the president had a conversation with the governors of the Northeast, who are also concerned with regards to developments in Niger, as well as the sanctions being given. Because if you look at the papers this morning, the Arewa Consultative Forum is concerned with this new sanction being imposed on supporters of the coup in Niger. They are saying that the president should look into lifting the sanctions and embrace dialogue instead. What do you make of that?
What I make of that is that the sanction regime that has been announced, and as a matter of fact, more to follow, is the way to go. Anybody that is actually impressing on Mr. President to go slow on, sanction should actually be investigated to fully understand where the person actually stands. Now, if someone is making a case for sanctions to be seriously, selective in terms of, like I said earlier, ensuring that sanctions are not taken that actually affect the common man in Niger, there is a case to make there. But sanctions that target the military juntas and their allies, of course, is the way to go. The moment they begin to feel the heat, they will then be ready to talk. That is part of the diplomacy, mediation, and all of that, that people are putting forward as alternative to rolling out the tanks and putting boots on the ground. That is perfect, and that has to remain excluded, at least for now, until all the diplomatic options, which includes sanction, have been fully exhausted.
And a meeting that could have been strategic failed to hold on, was it Wednesday, Tuesday, Wednesday? Of course, the AU, it included the AU, ECOWAS, and the United Nations, among whom were notable personalities in that delegation, including former Nigerian leader Abdulsalami Abubakar. Well, none of them had any audience with the Nigerian coup leaders, and sentiments within Niger say it was because of the anger that a percentage of the population were exhibiting towards the rest of Africa and the world over the sanctions, which made it impossible for them to host the people, the AU side, and its people, its supporters. But what are your thoughts on the support within Niger among the people towards the soldiers?
Well, I am not sure that there is overwhelming support towards the soldiers. I mean, ultimately, I think what we have seen playing out in Niger is support for whoever has told the Nigerians that under him or her, that they will have a better life, the country is going to be better governed, and so on and so forth. So people are venting frustration because for a very, very long time, they have been, pushed to the wall. As a matter of fact, you have a generation or two of Nigerians who have not tested, who have not come close to that, testing the definition of a good life. And so when somebody comes up and says, well, I'm the Messiah that is going to give you that good life, of course, they will embrace the alternative. I think that is what we are seeing playing out. Now, on the other hand, if you sample opinion all across Niger, you will see that while there is, the semblance of support for the military, none of them wants, a military intervention to take place because they know that, that will not augur well for anybody. Now, coming to the issue of the military juntas not, seeing the delegation that went to visit them. Well, it is not an isolated case. I've heard people say it's a disrespect for Nigeria and so on and so forth. No, it is, part of their negotiating strategy. As a matter of fact, the U.S. Deputy Secretary of State, Ms. Nolan, couldn't even get an audience with them either. So you see, this is playing hard to get. The time is too short, and perhaps the delegation was too high. I mean, we are looking at a sort of top-bottom approach rather than a bottom-top approach. I mean, most of these military officers, they trained in Nigeria. And so, even within the Nigerian, middle cadre, they have their colleagues, people who were roommates with them at the Nigerian Defense Academy. I mean, why not seek out those people, and get them? These are people that are on first name, terms with them. Get those people to initiate the conversation, and because they trust them, rather than sending in the big wigs and, that kind of created apprehensions in terms of, who knows what they are up to, and perhaps made them not to, be responsive. In any case, one would expect that in tomorrow's meeting, the actions that have been taken in the past, couple of weeks would be reevaluated with the goal of actually, rejigging their plan. And when they say that diplomacy is the option, that they indeed begin to, lend the rope and listen to our diplomats, because Nigeria has very fine, foreign service officials out there. Listen to them, listen to their advice in terms of how to approach this diplomatically.
All right, and I'll begin from there. Tomorrow's meeting. Far-reaching decisions will be taken, and I'm wondering what you foresee. That's on the one hand. And then on the other hand, regional powers are concerned that this coup could destabilize the Sahel, the Sahel region. But how hopeful are you that there'll be a return to constitutional order?
I am not very hopeful, and I think it is important to be upfront about that, at least not in the immediate. The ideal expectation for ECOWAS and indeed all democrats around the world is that, constitutional order is restored. But it is far-fetched. It is far-fetched because at this moment, the military juntas are very much bent on not having Mr. Tiani back in power. Now, ultimately, there would have to be compromises in terms of, okay, option A is, giving up power and returning it to the, democratically elected President Tiani. But option two...
Bazoum. Bazoum, you meant.
Bazoum, sorry. Bazoum, sorry. So returning power to, Mohamed Bazoum. But option B might be some sort of, transitional arrangement that hands power over to somebody that heads a transition government that masterminds, the negotiations on both sides, and then leading up to an election. Well, one would say that is the generic, approach that we have seen all over the world. But perhaps the time hasn't come for anything more radical than that, because if we consider the other side of the coin, which addresses the second question that you asked, the entire 7 states of Nigeria bordering with Niger are also involved in this. There is this saying that, they are so close, up to the point that some of them have their sitting rooms in Nigeria and some of their bedrooms in Niger. That is, how much, they are interwoven. And so the spillover effect is going to be catastrophic. And so when that being the case, it's probably time to now reduce the rhetorics. The points have been made that military coup will not be tolerated, and that the response is going to be swift and all of that. But the time now is here to begin to emphasize more of diplomacy, compromises, and so on and so forth that might lead to a transition government.
Yeah, but what are your thoughts on the bigger picture, as the spotlight also remains on ECOWAS' handling of this matter at hand, yet another one, and when you look at its capacity or the need for ECOWAS to maintain democratic principles and the rule of law?
Yes, to that extent, I would say that talking tough, not talking from both sides of the mouth in terms of condemning the coup and continue to condemn it and continue, to show body language that detests it completely is the right thing, because, those who feel that there is justification for the coup, I think they need to have a rethink. Okay, the situation in the country is bad. That can always be cited as an excuse. But show me one country in the world where military has taken over from, democratically elected government, make all sorts of promises, and actually delivered on those promises. You would have to search long and hard to find one, because what we often see is that ultimately the military juntas will become even worse than the civilian regime that they topple. So I think it is important to be very, very clear and consistent about the fact that you just don't show up and topple, a democratically elected government. But on the other hand, of course, Africa has quite a lot to do. Nigeria, for instance, is also dealing with the issue of credibility of elections, where ultimately it is not the electorate that decide who heads the country, but the court of law. And President Tinubu's case is an example. He is the head of ECOWAS at this moment, yet the tribunal has not, given a verdict. I mean, it's not a fault of his, but the point is that people point at all of this to question the credibility of even the ECOWAS itself. So, ECOWAS as a leader, as a bloc, has got to, rejig its ways and begin to get it right.
All right, and that's a fine place to leave the conversation. Collins Nweke, Public Affairs Analyst, thank you for your time on the program.
Always a pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Thank you.